just started streaming, or have you been streaming a while and find that your webcam setup is dull, lifeless, slightly bit overexposed or underexposed? Do you just blame the webcam, the software, the hardware for the issue and sort of just push on forward? Today, we are looking at how to configure the settings in your webcam and adjust lighting and exposure in order to get the right look for your streaming channel. Welcome to the Sugar Gaming channel, and today we're going to go through a few webcam settings to get your webcam looking clean without spending a ton of dollars on your setup. But before we get started, I'd like to thank you guys all very much, and if you guys are interested and you guys enjoy this content, make sure you guys drop over onto my Twitch at bsugar91, where you guys will get the uncensored version of this guy. A big shout out to our gaming community as well, the SMG gaming community, and yes, we are sponsored by them today. Guys, thank you so much for being such an incredible community. Without you guys, I think this YouTube channel or everything else that we do in tangent will not exist. Today, we're going to go through some of those webcam settings in order to help you better improve your streaming quality, or improve at least the webcam aspect of it, and give the viewers the best side of you. Today, we're going to start off with talking about environment. Now, I know you guys think that you can just chuck your setup in a room and as long as you got space to fit everything in, it's going to work for you. But in order to better understand how to set up your webcam, we need to understand some parameters around setting up your webcam, like the environment. And the first thing I want to touch on is the room you currently stream on. Preferably, you want to be in a streaming room where you can block out natural light. This will allow for you to be able to control changes or variants that the sunlight naturally brings. If you're unable to block light, I do highly suggest that you plan your streams around the evening time. This will give you the chance to be able to control the environment a heck of a lot better. This is key to actually starting off with a good setup. If you can't block that light out, make sure you guys pick that time in the evening where it's a lot darker, so you can control all the elements around you. Because when light changes, say if a cloud heads over the top of the house or over the sun and it blocks out all that light, you're going to be left with a bit of a quality change in your webcam. Next, let's talk about how you should have your lighting set up and how to create depth while keeping yourself looking clear and in focus. Most people who set up their webcams often have it looking flat or dull, even lifeless. People tend to forget that cameras have a foreground and a background. Splitting the foreground and the background into two categories allows you to set up the room correctly. Let's show you an example on how your webcam's foreground and background should look. Changing over to OBS, here you guys can see that the webcam, and well, I am not lighted properly. I've actually only got the room lights on just to showcase to you guys what it looks like when some streamers set up. Now, I could have easily set up my stream over here so that the light was directly on my face, but that only gives you 1 degree of sort of lighting. And here I want to showcase to you guys you know, how to adjust the foreground to make that foreground look a little bit more appealing. Okay, first and foremost, as you guys can see here in my setup, I've got 2 ring lights, one on the right hand side over here and one just in front of me. You guys will get to be able to see. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys what happens when I turn those ring lights on, and watch the detail in my face setup, watch what's going on, you know, in terms of where I've positioned it and how it creates almost like a natural shadow, or at least it looks kind of natural. Yeah. So we'll turn on our webcam, on our lights right now. Let's do that. Oh, she's a little bit bright. Let's bring that down just a little bit. Yeah. And then we're going to turn this one on too as well, and to add a little bit more light. And as you guys can see, if I readjust everything properly, you guys get a really good detailed look on me by not taking out too much of the shadow. If you guys saw it before when it was, you know, just the room light, I had a really dark shadow over me, but with this, at least the ring light's set to the right settings, and this will allow you to at least have some shadows left on your face to make it a little bit more natural. Make sure you guys don't overdo this, okay? If you guys are spotlighting, which a lot of people tend to do, which is bump your light up to the point where you get white spots and blurs, this is not really good to make the foreground look pretty. You want to bring that lighting down just enough until you can see the slight difference within the camera or the webcam that you're using, so it's not overdoing it like this. By adding 2 ring lights and highlighting the foreground, we are able to spotlight the focal point, which is the streamer, to stand out a little bit more. These lights don't have to be ring lights. It could be a low powered lamp or something similar. Positioned carefully, you are able to create or get rid of shadows and better highlight you. Be sure you adjust the lighting settings so the light isn't too harsh and you don't get light spots all over your face or over the focal point in which you're trying to highlight. It's really important to understand lighting settings are indicative of where and how you have your setup, and just remember every single setup is different, so the positioning of your ring lights is going to be specific to you and you alone. Next, we want to add a bit of depth into the background. It is really important to understand that the background shouldn't be as intense as the foreground, so go easy on the elements you add. Improving your background is really easy. This can be done by adding in a few extra things, some things like an RGB light or maybe some decoration, some shelvings, as you guys can see behind me. What's really important that the light shouldn't be overbearing. It should be soft and it should be complementary of what you have in the background and the decorations. It's there to highlight the background. It's there to sit there and create a picture. And if your light's too bright or you've got too much of it, it can pull away from the focal point, which is you as a streamer. Moving back over to OBS, as you guys can see in the background here, I've added in RGB lights behind me, and I've got my little shelf of all my tech gear up there. I mean, I'm doing a YouTube tech channel, what do you expect? Sort of just adding in the RGB bulb. As you guys can see in the background where it's all purple and stuff, is actually an RGB bulb that we just put into the light socket up above. And it's a real cheap alternative, guys, if you guys want to create some of that lighting and that background foreground effect. Actually notice now that I've switched over to the background light being on, that the spotlights are a little bit too bright and highlighting me too much. So in actual fact, these need to come down just a tad bit, maybe it was just that one on the right hand side, to paint the foreground a little bit better so I don't disappear into the background. Yeah, maybe even bringing this front light up just a tad, just a smidge, will help highlight my whole front part while keeping a bit of a natural shadow on this side of my face. Really such a big difference in quality when you guys look at it. If you're adding in little bits and pieces in the background, or you're adding in features like a shelf, or just those lights, or as you guys can see just over here, my lamp here, to create an ambient feel behind me, to create that depth of field and bring a lot of the detail out of my face so that I'm the focal point in this. Getting an RGB bulb for your room is a great alternative, a great cheap alternative. It allows for a little bit of mood lighting and is a really good option if you're strapped for cash. The reason why we want to add in subtle lighting is to create an aperture that allows for even lighting. If I only had those 2 ring lights, I would look blown out like crazy. With a bit of light in the background, with this setup, I'm able to even out that light from front to back and have it look more appealing to the eye or more pleasing overall. These 2 steps alongside a shelf or some sort of decoration will help paint a picture with your webcam. The last thing I want to discuss is how to configure the settings in OBS to get the best look for your webcam. Quite often, we miss these settings, or we don't actually fully understand these settings. So it's really important to couple together your environment, the ring lights to highlight your focal point, having a background light of some sort or some sort of decoration or something to highlight that background in order to give that depth. Coupling it with those settings is going to keep everything looking nice and sharp and professional on your stream. Jumping back into OBS, guys, as you guys can see, we've got the background set up with my RGB lights, my lamp, the RGB bulb that we were talking about just briefly before, and the RGB strip and my fish tank, actually, which I forgot to mention, which has a little bit of ambient light and helps to paint a better scene. Yes, I went for a bit of stuff in the background for me because I felt like I don't know, I just felt like I needed it, and it looks tidy, and as long as you guys can set that up tidily, you're going to be a champion. But this time we're going to go through the settings and teach you guys a bit of the settings and how they should be set up in order to improve your webcam just that little bit extra. If you're unsure on how to get into your settings, in your sources, you guys will see video capture device. Video capture device, all you got to do down on the left hand side here, or wherever you've got your sources tab, I will move that over here so you guys can see a little better. Where you guys have your sources tab, you can go into your video capture device at properties. In properties, you get a pop-up window over here. When I hit configure video, you guys can see the window pops up for the properties of my actual webcam. Yes, my webcam. So in here, we can choose things like brightness, contrast, saturation, and all of the above. How sharp you want the camera to look, the white balance, etc. So in camera control here, you guys can see zoom, focus, exposure. Zoom does exactly what it's supposed to do. It zooms, yep. If we pull that back, it brings it back. It has a limited amount on what you can zoom on, so you can only go to 193. Guys, remember, if you guys are ever changing your webcam in OBS, crop please. Do not zoom. All right, this feature is used for like if you want to press the button and zooms your camera in, you can do that, but zoom is not used for setting up your camera because you lose the pixel density within that space when you zoom the camera in. Okay, the things that we want to talk about today is actually the focus here and the exposure. Yes, we're going to be talking about both of those two, because if we can control these two here, we can create a real streamlined stream. So the settings that we're going to be dialing in today is our focus. So depending on where you are, what you're going to do, where you're sitting in terms of your webcam, mine's right here, so the focal point will be a little bit closer. We're going to grab our focus and we're going to slam it all the way to the top. As you guys can see, I've gone really blurry. And what we're going to do is we're going to step that down slowly. And we're just going to keep stepping it down. Keep that slider going. Keep it going. You're going to notice that this is going to come right down to about 45 before it focuses in on me. So we're going to 75. We can see ourselves, but I put 100%. If you guys can't see on screen, I'm actually really fuzzy at the moment. We're going to bring it back down a little bit more. We're at 65 now. It's looking a lot better, but things in the background are a little bit blurred. 60. We got to 55. 55 is not looking too bad, but I can see that little bit of blur even if we dropped to 50. And what's happened here is, if you guys can see, my face is starting to become in focus, my microphone is in focus, but the background has like a slight aperture to it. That little bit of blur, that f-stop, that stops right around here. Yeah, it's a little bit blurry within this space here. I don't know if you guys can actually see on webcam, but it gives the appearance that we're using a professional camera by just using the focus and controlling it. Now, I tend to stick around 45 and 50 depending on how I'm feeling it's looking on stream. And what that actually does is it gives me a really good focal point. It starts to blur out the background just a little tiny bit. It's not the best blur. It starts to blur out the background just a tiny bit, gives you a little bit more depth, because remember, when something's in focus inside, in front, like our eyes recognize it, and the back is slightly blurred, the detail becomes more defined where you want that focal point. So having that focus set right there at 45 allows for you to get a better webcam experience. We're going to dip it up to 50. I think 50 is probably a really good stopping point. And actually, if you see in the background on this side, I'm guessing, before, when everything was just focused at 0, the wording was a little bit more clearer, but now it's not focused at the moment. It's actually a little bit more blurry this way. Sorry, there it is. A little bit more blurry. And then you guys can see around the edges of me, I'm quite defined, but behind me there's just that slight blur that gives that depth into your webcam. And this is what you want when going through and setting up your webcam. The next thing we're going to set up to make sure that this doesn't change when you're putting your hand in front of it, and it changes everything and changes the exposure and blah blah blah, is your exposure. Yes, if I set that to auto, put my hand in front of it just real briefly, yeah, it automatically changes the exposure and sometimes creates a delay that we do not want within our space. All right, so what we're actually going to do is we're going to turn up the brightness in the background a little bit, and then we're going to play around with this exposure. Now watch what happens when I dip down in here. Notice the flickering in the back too as well. You guys can see that flickering in the back. That's the anti-flicker that we were talking about before. But as you guys can see with the exposure, I'm able to change it to that point where I can get it sitting clean and perfect. Exposure is one thing people miss in this, and this can give you a really good look. If I push the exposure right up, I get really blown out. Oh my gosh, that's horrible. But if I bring that back down and find that sweet spot, that's a little bit too dark. That -5 seems to be working for me. You get a really clear, crisp picture that allows for, you know, it doesn't move because it's not set to auto. The autofocus is set by you manually, and it just keeps the colors and the exposure on point. So when I put my hand in front of it, things don't drop anymore. Notice that the exposure doesn't change that much. It stays within that spectrum, that space, and gives you a cleaner look. Moving over to big screen now, you guys can see here in the big screen a bit more of an example of how everything's looking. As you guys can see in the background, it's nicely blurred out. You can see just around in these areas here, it's slightly blurred out, and actually I'm looking a little bit sharper. I think the focus could be turned down maybe a drop, just to give a little bit more focus on me. But as you guys can see where the microphone is sitting at the moment, just here in front where my hand is poking up, you guys can see all of that detail within that microphone, and sitting behind me there's some depth. So creating depth within your guys' streams and within your webcam allows for a better experience for the viewer. It actually makes it look a lot more professional. Well, there you guys have it, team. The equation to at least start setting up your webcam so it looks professional, it looks healthy, and it looks, well, what's the word that I'm going for here? Well, it just looks better. That's all I have for you guys today, folks. Remember the 3 things. You gotta go through your environment. Make sure you guys are blocking out as much change in environment as possible. So if there's lighting that causes it, like the sun for example, make sure you guys are blocking that out. The second thing, you need to think about your foreground and your background, and do the little things like adding in ring lights and adding in foreground lights shelves in order to create that depth. Lastly, as you guys saw with the settings within OBS, going in and configuring those in order to stop exposure from, well, being overexposed, as well as having that autofocus stay on point. As you guys don't tend to move too much back and forward, the autofocus needs to stay where it is to keep you in focus and keep the webcam looking crisp. As per the usual, guys, thank you so very much for watching my video. If you guys are interested and you guys like the content and this has helped you, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button for more gaming content, gaming reviews, product reviews, and of course tech and streamer tips. That's me, guys. I'm signing off, guys. As per the always, it's crazy out there at the moment. Stay safe, stay within your bubble, stay gaming, and as always, we'll see you guys in the next video.